Let me be honest with you. I have not showered. That's why I'm wearing a hat, because my hair is like crazy. My microphone stand broke, so it's propped up on a pillow, but you can't see it thanks to the magic of YouTube. I don't have any fizzy water. I'm out of my coconuts, cucumbers, and limes, so I'm drinking this mandarin orange water, but it is kind of like sweet and tangy. But you know what else is sweet and tangy? Bible reading with Wally. Intro. We are back with Bible reading with Wally, and normally I release these as part of the JW Thoughts broadcast, but this one I thought deserved a standalone episode because, as you've heard me say before, I started reading the Bible honestly. By the time I got to Judges chapter 19, I didn't believe anymore. So I would like to talk about Judges chapters 19 and 20. I probably should have done a little bit more research. I'm going a little bit off the cuff here, but that's okay because that's what you've come to expect here at the JW Thoughts channel. Wally's raw, blockheaded banalities, if you will. So let's get into it. First off, the story that I find so offensive in Judges chapter 19 has to do with this Levite dude that is going home to Ephraim, if I'm not mistaken. And on his journey home to Ephraim, he is tired and decides to stay in a city. And when he comes to the city, no one will take him in. So he's sitting in the city square, and this old man comes up and says, "Well, Sonny, you can come stay with me and my daughters. That would be absolutely lovely." And so this old man takes him in. Now, the people of, what's the city? Gibeah, something like that. The people of this city go on this horn dog rapey bonanza, and they're like, "Ooh, look, fresh meat, a new person in our city." Mind you, this guy was sitting in the city center. No one would take him in. Then once this old guy takes him in, after he'd been sitting there for presumably quite some time, then all of a sudden people are like, "I want to rape him. I need some of that ass." So, sorry for the crassness, but this episode is not going to be for the faint of heart. So the people start banging on the door like, "Give us the man, give us the man, we want him." And I think it is a little bit interesting, depending on how the translations work out. But the general consensus is that they wanted to have sexual relations with him, which without consent is called rape, for those of you that don't know. So the old man is like, "Well, I don't want to, injure my guest here in my house, but why don't you take my daughter and you can rape her all that you like?" And they don't really like that idea. So then the Levite decides that he'll open the door real quick, kick his concubine that was traveling with him out the door, and the men of the city rape her all night long. She crawls back to the front door and passes out. The guy, this Levite, wakes up the next morning, opens the door, sees her lying there, and I think what it says in the Bible is he basically says, "Come on, get up. We gotta go." And she didn't move. So she was dead. When did she die? Lord knows. But pretty much she was raped all night, crawled back to the door, and he kicks her and, "Hey, wake up." And she doesn't get up. So she's dead. He puts her on his little donkey and then rides away off to his destination. And this guy thinks, okay, well, I need to make an example of these people, of Gibeah. God, I really should actually look. I think it's Gibeah. We're gonna say Gibeah. I think that's right. And he cuts her up into pieces. He takes a knife and cuts this person up and mails on the Donkey Express parts of her body to all of the various tribes of Israel. Now, let me go back and just give you a little bit more context. In the story, it does say that she ran away from him. Now, depending on which translation of the Bible that you're using, some say that it was she committed prostitution. Going off of, the manuscripts and the original language, it basically meant that she left him. And this could mean that she was unhappy with him. And she went to the house of her father. And then the guy went there to pick her up. And then for 6 days or 5 days in a row, they kept eating and getting drunk. And then he's like, oh, just stay another day. I kept eating, getting drunk. Just stay another day. Eating, getting drunk. Stay another day. And then the father of this concubine, of this Levite, eventually left with her. And then they were traveling back to his city. So that was the scenario. She had already run away from him. Now, in the New World Translation, it says she committed acts of prostitution. But again, depending on how you wish to translate, and some of these things can be a little bit dodgy, so it's hard to say 100% what is the original accurate version of this. But in any case, she ran away from him, went to the house of her father. He went and picked her up. Then they're traveling. Once they're traveling, they get to the city. Everyone wants to rape him. This old man's like, hey, you can rape my daughters instead. They didn't like that. But then this guy, this Levite, kicks her out and they rape her. She dies. So he cuts her up into pieces and then mails them on the Donkey Express to all of the various tribes of Israel. And they're disgusted by this. Oh, how could this happen? And I probably should do more research for these videos and not go so off the cuff. But Gibeah was the tribe of, I think, Benjamin. And so they basically saw this as an act or a crime. Maybe I actually will look at this, make sure I'm right here. 1 second. Gibeah of Benjamin, yeah. So this Gibeah was of the house of Benjamin is what it says. So then everyone is angry at the sons of Benjamin. So all the sons of Israel, they get together and are like, oh, we need to mess these guys up. So they muster up 400,000 men, and they're all going up, and they inquired of God. And Jehovah said, well, this tribe should be in the lead. So remember that the action that they're about to take is sanctioned by God. He is saying, yep, this is a good thing to do. Go forward and make it happen, Captain. And then they kind of get shellacked for a couple days, and the sons of Israel lose. And then they keep pleading to Jehovah, and he says, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We're gonna really give you the victory there. So it was no big thing. I think in the end, something like 20,000 or 40,000 people ended up dying in the end. I'll get to the Watchtower apologetics later. But basically, they went up against and eventually killed almost all of the men, women, children, didn't matter the age, and wiped them out. After they wiped them out, they were made a pact and said, okay, well, we're not going to marry any of our daughters to any of the sons of the Benjamites. But, we don't want a son of Israel and a worshiper of Jehovah to go without having their genetic line continue. So they go and attack random people that aren't involved in this, and they slaughter men and women and male boys, but they preserve alive all of the virgins of the city, so that way they can hand over these sex slaves, so that way the Benjamites can continue their bloodline. Now, this is such a gritty story, and the whole thing is disgusting. Anyone, whether you're a Christian, whether you're of any faith whatsoever, if you were to take this story seriously and saying, yep, this thing happened, I don't believe anyone when they would read this and look me in the face and say, yeah, that's it was just part of the society at the time. So at some point in history, you're saying that God was okay with wiping out, with a few exceptions, an entire tribe of Israel, and then going and taking slave virgins, sex slaves, let's not beat around the bush here, going and taking sex slaves from an unrelated tribe and giving them as a gift or as recompense to, what was done to the Benjamites, just so that way they could be preserved alive. And all of this was okayed by God. And what was done to warrant all of this violence and all of this atrocity? This old guy took this guy that was a Levite from Ephraim into his house. They wanted to rape him. They said no. So the dude kicked his concubine out, his extra wife, as it were, and they raped her all night long. So you're responding to one act of atrocity with a larger act of atrocity. How does that make any sense whatsoever? And I was really curious because I couldn't remember exactly what Watchtower had to say about this. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, are you in for not a treat. What do they say about this account? Well, going back all the way to 1961 in the February 15th Questions from Readers, it asks, why did Jehovah allow the Israelites to suffer defeat twice before the tribe of Benjamin, before he allowed them to mete out due punishment to this tribe for its crime at Gibeah? The answer, Judges chapter 19 tells of certain scoundrels of Gibeah ravaging a woman all night so that by morning she was dead. The people of Gibeah then committed the atrocious crime of condoning this sin of the inhabitants of the city. The tribe of Benjamin was also guilty in this respect. It refused to hear the demands of the rest of the tribes that the scoundrel should be put to death. This immoral condition challenged the faithfulness of the rest of the tribes of God's chosen people. The slaughtering of so many of them in the beginning imposed a great test upon the faithful tribes, especially with regard to the rightness of their cause. By letting the faithful tribes suffer such losses, 40,000 men in 2 days, Jehovah was testing them to see whether they would be persistent in this determined effort to uproot this gross evil in Israel when it brought such great losses to themselves. After all of this, of quote-unquote the faithful people of Israel, God was testing them. And by testing, we mean allowing them to lose 40,000 men. And whenever I read these figures, I don't like to just read it off. I like to actually tell people to picture what 40,000 people looks like to you. Go on Google Images and look up a stadium that holds 40,000 people. And then once you see all of them, imagine that each of them is a son, a father, a brother, a nephew, a husband. Like, these are real people. Now picture that in your mind. And God was just using all of those 40,000 people as a test. This story in the Bible is so disgusting from so many angles. And again, I don't think that most Christians that do believe that the Bible is the infallible Word of God will just look me in the eyes and say, well, it was pretty bad, but what would you expect at that time? If you are a loving God, if you are trying to set the example of what is right and wrong, and you are trying to convey that to humanity, why are you just showing people that killing is fine? Of all of the things that you could do in your infinite wisdom and your infinite power, you're just perpetuating exactly what an ancient civilization might do anyway. One petty crime equals thousands of deaths. Anyway, this whole account is so bizarre and so crazy that when I read it with a clear mind and honesty, and I wasn't going into reading the account thinking that, well, God is love and everything he does is loving. And when I just was reading it to find out what it said, honestly and truthfully, I was so appalled and so disgusted by this whole account. I thought to myself, I can't support this behavior. It's so barbaric, and I've had for my entire life this vision of a God that predicates all of his actions on love. And I see things like this, and more things, obviously, because I had already read through Deuteronomy and Numbers. I thought, a big yawn. I thought, this God is not the same God that I grew up to worship. Now, if people want to sort of say that these are just analogies and none of this ever happened and it's an ancient civilization and they were God's chosen people, but he didn't actually, take part in this, or he didn't sanction any of it, and, he wouldn't even approve of it, and it's more about, showing love to people and all the blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's fine, because your version of worship of this God is more nuanced and benign and less harmful than people that say, no, this actually happened and it was loving. Anyone that can call these actions loving and reasonable is out of their goddamn minds. Anyway, this was a more enthusiastic, long, and impassioned episode of Bible Reading with Wally. But I thought this one was important just because it had such an impact on me. And hey, it's my channel, so I get to do whatever the hell I want. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Bible Reading with Wally, and I will see you soon.